Welcome to the basics video where I go over the basics of the phone that the average person will care about. This video is for the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. Feel free to check out my specs video for a more detailed explanation of this phone. This Samsung made Galaxy S8 Plus has a 12 megapixel back camera along with an 8 megapixel front camera. As usual, Samsung cameras look amazing during the day and decent during the night. With this said, there are a bunch of features that make the pictures look better, but from an auto standpoint, they look warm and saturated at night. As for video recording, this phone can capture 4K at 30 frames per second, which isn't bad at the time of the release, but they do limit the amount of time that you can record, whether it's 4K at 30 frames per second or 1080p at 60 frames per second. The front camera can now focus, which isn't a huge deal, but it's cool that Samsung added this without anyone asking for it. Maybe they will add the infrared blaster back on if no one asks for it. The back camera is pretty much the same as the S7 Edge, so it will get an 8.5 out of 10. TouchWiz isn't really the best in my opinion, but with Android 7.0, Samsung made this phone a lot nicer. And with Android 8.0, they made it almost perfect. I have always found it to be very heavy and cause a lot of lag, but in this phone it's not that bad. By now, Samsung has learned what their user base loves and hates. I love the option to swipe up to access the apps along with the always-on display. There are some gestures built into this phone that I love, like swiping down on the fingerprint scanner to access the notifications, but there are also some that I don't like the edge panel and split screen. I've never been a fan of those options, and I'm pretty sure I've already told you that in a couple different videos. This phone is missing one of my favorite features, which is double tap to wake, but that's because there's a virtual home button on the front. Still, I would have liked to see this feature come to Samsung phones. They were on the right path with the software, so it will get a 7.5 out of 10. As for the battery, it is decent. For a 3500 mAh cell, I would assume that this battery life would be pretty good. With that said, it isn't horrible, but I see no difference in battery life when compared to the S7 Edge or the S9 Plus. After 15.5 hours of usage, my phone was left with 15%, and 2 hours and 45 minutes of that was screen on time. Another day I got 13 hours of usage with 4% remaining, and 2 hours and 24 minutes of that was screen on time. Another day I got 14 hours of usage with 10% remaining, and 3 hours and 44 minutes of that was screen on time. All of these figures are with the brightness all the way up and the resolution set to 1440p. This phone does support Qualcomm Quick Charge 2.0 and it charges pretty fast. You should be able to get a full charge in less than 2 hours. Only time will tell how well this battery holds up, but so far it's alright. The battery life honestly isn't the best, but it does get through the day. The battery is not removable by the user, forcing you to spend money to change it out if you need to. That may be an issue for some people. Overall, the battery category receives an 8 out of 10. In this case, I will compare the phone to the Samsung S7 Edge. The phone is dramatically different both on the outside and the inside. First of all, the phone is noticeably larger. The front no longer has a physical home button, and the back has a fingerprint scanner. The curved front and back makes the phone more symmetrical than the S7 Edge and fits even nicer into the hands. The screen resolution is almost the same at 1440p, but with an 18:9 ratio, and it now has 6.2 inches. It also has Gorilla Glass 5 instead of Gorilla Glass 4. The back camera is the same, but the front camera has been bumped from a solid 5 megapixel sensor to an 8 megapixel focusable sensor. The processor and GPU were upgraded, moving from a Snapdragon 820 processor to the Snapdragon 835 processor. The battery size has decreased by 100 mAh, which makes no sense at all. The charging port has finally been upgraded to the USB-C port, along with going from USB 2.0 to USB 3.1. The Bixby button has been added, but a year later Bixby still has nothing on the Google Assistant. I tried using it and it's nothing special. Sorry, Samsung. There is the addition of the infrared emitter and the iris scanner, but those are only used for security and convenience. Lastly, there are other minor additions like Bluetooth 5.0. In my opinion, I believe that these upgrades make the S Plus a solid upgrade over the S7 Edge, so I will give this category an 8 out of 10. With this said, the S9 Plus is a more polished version of the S8 Plus. Just saying. As always, glass is glass, and the curved glass on the phone does not make it stronger. Since the screen is an AMOLED display, it is not going to be cheap to repair. Screen replacements will cost the same regardless if you damage the glass or the AMOLED under it, and will run you about $280 to fix the screen yourself, or $340 for a third party to repair it for you. The camera lens will run you about $35 to fix, or about $6 to do it yourself. If you're wondering, yes, they do break, but they don't break on their own. And the back panel will run you about $65 or $15 to do it yourself. Glass is glass, so it doesn't really matter if you buy OEM or aftermarket. The charging port can be replaced and will cost you about $7 to do it yourself or $75 for a third party to do it for you. I haven't had to replace these batteries yet, but they do need to be replaced over time and will run you about $15 to do it yourself or $65 to $85 for a store to do it for you. It may be difficult to find OEM batteries, but it shouldn't matter too much. With all this said, Samsung does repair all these issues, but the price will vary depending on the situation. The prices for the S8 Plus have dropped over the year, which is nice, but doing any repairs will most likely ruin the water resistance of this phone. With all this said, I will give the S8 Plus a 7 out of 10 for durability and repair cost. Don't break this phone. Now, should you buy this phone, with a score of 78%, I believe that this is a nice phone and you should definitely consider it. Being a flagship phone is costly and will be pricey to fix, even being a year old. This phone should be good for most people until about 2019 or 2020. After that, the lag will most likely make this phone unusable. I hope you learned something from these videos, but I want to learn something from you. Do you think that this redesign was for the better or for the worse? Let me know in the comment section or on Twitter at MattofRWR, and feel free to follow me on the social media listed above. Lastly, subscribe to my channel if you like these videos. Every subscription helps. Thanks for watching.